Loneliness affects us all from time to time on a personal level. But now more than ever, loneliness is finding its way into the workplace. So how is loneliness impacting you and those around you at work? And how could tackling this one thing impact productivity, employee retention, and the sense of belonging on your team? Let's start with an insightful story to provide a helpful backdrop to our conversation. Near the edge of the world, inside the frigid Arctic Circle, exists a small human settlement called Kugluktuk. Bordering the Arctic Ocean, it's part of Canada's largest and most northern territory, Nunavut. Kugluktuk can be an unforgiving place with temperatures reaching 50 degrees below zero, darkness lingering for more than 20 hours a day in the winter, and meal delivery via a fishing line and a hole in the ice. It's a setting that lends itself to extreme isolation and loneliness. This tiny community of Indigenous people of northern Canada had one of the highest teen suicide rates in the world for many years. That is, until Canada's national sport took root. Ice hockey? No. Canada's other national sport, lacrosse. In the early 2000s, Russ Shepard, a teacher at Kugluktuk High School, established the Kugluktuk Grizzlies, the school's first ever lacrosse team. Shepard hoped to provide the students with a spark, an ignition that would light the flame of teamwork, commitment, and dedication. He wanted to create a feeling of togetherness, a bond shared through sport that would give the students a desperately needed sense of belonging and purpose. Because Kugluktuk is so remote, it proved very difficult to acquire lacrosse gear. Coaches and members of the community went to great lengths to ensure the team had what they needed. A group of chief mates who were part of the Arctic Sea Lift, a resupply system involving a fleet of ships, loaded large barges with lacrosse gear and pushed them with tugboats through the ice-ridden waters, braving the treacherous conditions. All in the name of greater belonging. Due to the commitment of many, it didn't take long before the Grizzlies were fully equipped and practicing on their icy Arctic playing fields. Not only did the Grizzlies find their way to the National Lacrosse Championship, but Kugluktuk's teen suicide rate, once one of the world's highest, fell to zero. For the people of Kugluktuk, lacrosse wasn't a game, it was survival. Belonging and purpose turned an isolated town plagued by loneliness into a unified town filled with hope. Isolation and loneliness ravaged, but purpose and belonging healed. The lesson for all of us, cultivating a culture of belonging takes intentional and sometimes extreme effort, but that effort pays off. Much like Kugluktuk, today's workspaces are cold and barren, in need of leaders to provide belonging. Your team might not be as remote as the Arctic Circle or facing such dire survival circumstances as the people of Kugluktuk, but rest assured, loneliness is battering your team. With work cycles spinning faster, remote work becoming more prevalent, technology advancing, and a digital native generation flooding the workforce, workplace loneliness is quickly turning from a simmer to a boil. In fact, according to our research of 2,000 global workers, a colossal 72% of workers feel lonely at least monthly, with 55% saying they feel lonely weekly. The global workforce is lonelier than ever before, resulting in disengaged, dissatisfied, and disloyal employees. If you haven't begun discussing loneliness at work, you soon will, as it's very top of mind for the emerging generations. 73% of Gen Z report sometimes or always feeling alone. Additionally, 75% of Gen Z and half of millennials have left a job because of mental health reasons, compared with 34% of other generations. So considering that 3/4 of the 2030 workforce will be millennials and Gen Z, loneliness represents a looming employee engagement and retention issue. So why is work the best place to tackle loneliness? Work is littered with loneliness lifelines. Work provides purpose, routine, learning, and meaningful relationships. And not to mention, work is the activity we spend most of our waking hours engaged in. Leaders like you have the best opportunity to throw these lifelines into the ocean of lonely workers, ultimately creating a stronger team, better organization, and a healthier us. Before I give 4 steps to lessening loneliness amongst your team, let's first better understand loneliness. Loneliness is the absence of connection. It's not the absence of people. Someone who's surrounded by people may still feel lonely. If your team members feel disconnected from you, the leader, their peers, the organization, or the work itself, That creates a sense of loneliness, ultimately hindering their well-being and performance of the team member and the team. The title of my latest book is Connectable, which means to link together. When people are teachable, they are ready and willing to be taught. Similarly, when people are connectable, they are ready and willing to be connected. A connectable leader is ready and willing to establish and facilitate team connections. A connectable team member is ready and willing to connect with teammates. A connectable culture is ready and willing to foster deeper human connections across the team or organization. Today's smart devices are connectable. You can connect your smartphone, for example, to a smart TV, Wi-Fi network, or charging station. When a device is connected, it's more powerful, intelligent, and useful. A connectable team experiences similar benefits. When workers are connected to the team, the work, and their leader, they are stronger, healthier, and more useful. Just like a smartphone was built to connect with other technology, humans are built to connect with other humans. We are all connectable. A recent study was done where a group of people were put through a scenario where they experienced exclusion. Their brains were monitored during this experience, and not surprisingly, their brains lit up. But where the brain lit up was very telling, and it sheds light on how important it is to address loneliness at work. The part of the brain that registered exclusion was the same part of the brain that registers physical pain. That means exclusion and loneliness are felt biologically the same as being physically hit. How could anyone expect a workforce to show up fully to work when these ailments are occurring? Considering loneliness is a universal human condition, it's very likely that people on your team are experiencing loneliness and struggling to bring their full and capable selves to work, making them unable to fully deliver for their teammates, customers, and clients. It's as if we're asking workers to fully focus on the task at hand or deliver delightful customer experiences while they are being physically and mentally assaulted by an invisible bully. It's not an exaggeration to say that loneliness is devastating workers and their organizations, silently incapacitating many and wreaking havoc on engagement, retention, and overall performance. Now, if you or your team experience loneliness, then that means your brain works. Loneliness is useful. Much like how hunger is our cue to eat, loneliness is our biological cue to seek connection. Loneliness isn't shameful, it's a signal. A signal we belong together and we are better together. Now that we have a better understanding of loneliness and how it's impacting our teams, let's cover the 4 steps to lessen loneliness so you can create a stronger team. Do you have people with a pulse on your team and do you want them to have better relationships? Then this framework is for you, my friend. This framework is a 4-step process with each step represented by a letter in the word link. We adopted this framework after 2 years of research, surveying 2,000 global workers, collaborating with over 50 leaders, and working alongside hundreds of organizations. The audiences we've helped in this framework have ranged from C-suite to frontline supervisors and everyone in between. And each step can be executed virtually or in person. The principal reason why the framework strategies we're about to cover are so transformational is that it only takes you. You don't necessarily need to persuade other leaders or get buy-in from your team or overhaul your company culture. There are subtle shifts you can make as a leader to completely change the well-being of your entire team. The healthiest organizations have found a way to have concurrent commitments to human dignity and performance. They don't sacrifice well-being of employees for high performance. They also don't sacrifice performance to bend to every need of their employees. They strike a balance. When you utilize this framework to lessen loneliness, it improves employee well-being and organizational success. Step number 1 in the Less Loneliness framework is to look at loneliness. Identify loneliness in self and others. An awareness around loneliness, what it is, how it's impacting you and your team, is the first step towards lessening loneliness. Loneliness is a subjective experience, so there are no hard and fast rules about what it looks like. Many people may hide their feelings for fear of embarrassment or because they don't want to appear weak. This can make loneliness difficult to identify. As a leader, your best approach is to take the time to get to know and really understand your team. This will help you to recognize when someone is feeling disconnected or left out by the rest of the team. Be sure to listen to other team members' concerns too. They might be more aware of their colleagues' feelings and emotions than you are. Here are some common identifiers of lonely workers. As an exercise, think of someone on your team you suspect might be feeling lonely. Which of the following applies to that person? Sloppy work, lack of learning and development, change in routine, stops offering input, skips or resents meetings, only talks work, an apathetic attitude, and excessive working. If you'd like to measure just how connected your team is, then check out our Team Connection Assessment. It's the first and only tool to effectively assess the strength of relationships among a team. It measures the strength and quality of connections teams have with their teammates, manager, and the work itself. Then it generates a custom report providing research-based recommendations to improve the team's connections. Our devices are always informing us of how strongly they're connected to Wi-Fi or other networks. It's time workers and leaders have the same connectivity information about their teams. Step 2 in the Less Loneliness framework is invest in connection. Improve the strength of work relationships. One way to invest in connection among your team is to create a connectable culture where people feel comfortable to connect with each other. According to research, the mental health resource workers want most is a more open and accepting culture. Essentially, they want psychological safety, a place where they feel that one's voice is welcome with bad news, questions, concerns, half-baked ideas, and even mistakes. Teams can be lonely places. People can feel vulnerable and exposed if they believe their teammates don't support their ideas or appreciate their work. These interpersonal struggles intensify for remote workers who lack the support of a nodding ally across the table in a meeting. It's challenging for leaders to create psychological safety because by virtue of their role, they have power, and power is a barrier to psychological safety. In order to counterbalance the weight of their powerful role, leaders have to go out of their way to intentionally and strategically build psychological safety. When workers feel psychologically secure and protected, their need for belonging is fulfilled, and thus loneliness is lessened. Leaders who create psychological safety among a team also reap 12% increase in productivity, 27% reduction in turnover, and 40% reduction in safety incidents. If you lead others, here's one way to create a sense of psychological safety on your team. Speak last. When leaders share their thoughts about a topic and then ask for the team's opinion, it's too late. By speaking first, leaders undermine the dialogue and thwart creativity because the team will be less likely to volunteer any ideas that conflict with the leaders. The skill of holding your opinion to yourself until everyone has spoken provides leaders with the authentic and unbiased thoughts of the team, and it provides team members with the feeling that they are heard and valued contributors. Once leaders start speaking last, they create more space for their team to have a voice. In fact, teams where a manager spoke 80% of the time or more were less successful than teams who practiced turn-taking during discussions. Psychological safety exists when team members feel they have the opportunity to speak in roughly equal proportions to their peers. When the expectation is for each team member to share before the leader does, team members have equal opportunity to have their voice heard during a meeting. Psychological safety is the wellspring workplaces need to repair and refresh workers who are struggling with loneliness. Step number 3 in the Less Loneliness framework is narrow the focus. Illuminate what's most important at work. Who better to learn how to avoid loneliness and isolation than from the professionals who operate 254 miles away from civilization? Astronauts on the International Space Station. American engineer and class of 2013 NASA astronaut Christina Koch is all too familiar with remote isolation. On February 6, 2020, Christina Koch returned from the International Space Station after breaking the record for the longest continuous time in space by a woman. She circled Earth 5,097 times, where she only saw a total of 11 different people over a period of 328 days. While in extreme isolation, astronauts like Koch avoid loneliness by having clear direction, which narrows their focus. While the direction of their overarching mission is clear, safely up and safely down, creating clarity in their roles, tasks, and daily routines is important. They achieve clarity in the following ways: know the duration of each mission, know what resources they will have, and know what is required of them every day. Astronauts have 12-hour workdays that are scheduled down to 5-minute increments. Koch says, regimentation is not a problem on the space station. Having a sense of purpose every single minute of our day is one of the things that helps us get through those long periods of isolation. Regimentation can really help. If Koch would start to find herself beginning to experience loneliness, she would identify a specific problem and come up with a specific solution. Without a clear path, we're susceptible to wander. Wandering leads us to being lost. Being lost is lonesome. Carter Cass, the former CEO of Walmart.com and a senior leader at both PepsiCo and Electronic Arts, said the following: "The loneliest I have ever been was when I was managing at scale and I just did not know if I was doing it right. I did not know who I could talk to." Cass has seen firsthand how a lack of direction can lead people adrift. During my conversation with Cass, he discussed how when people face a problem with a lot of unknowns, they often pull back, isolating themselves rather than seeking the advice they need. People get scared and retreat, says Cass. Confusion spurs alienation. Clarity cultivates connection. Be relentless in cultivating clarity for your team. Be sure you're communicating clearly and ensure your team has clarity in the mission and what is required of them. Step number 4 in the Less Loneliness framework is Kindle the Momentum. Inflame what's working to sustain progress. Think of your teams and your own well-being like the depleting battery of your phone. You don't have a pleasant conversation with someone once and then feel recharged forever. Our well-being batteries are always depleting, and it takes seeking and establishing meaningful connections to replenish the battery. Much like connecting your phone charger to a power source to increase the battery life, you must connect with others to increase your well-being and protect against the empty battery that is loneliness. The power source of our well-being is our social connections, and those connections have to be continuously kindled and nurtured. That's why when momentum is created by step number 4, we need to kindle it and continue to forge strong connections across the team. One way to kindle momentum among a team is with purpose. The most impactful leadership behavior to counteract loneliness is to create shared meaning among a team. Nothing squashes loneliness quite like contributing to a worthwhile goal and feeling part of something bigger than oneself. A powerful sense of belonging stems from the human desire to utilize one's strengths, gifts, or talents to make a contribution that is valued by the team. Being needed reduces the risk of social abandonment, ultimately freeing people to do higher-level work. Purpose gives meaning to people's efforts, and a shared purpose builds togetherness. Leaders can counter the energy-sapping effects of loneliness by getting teams engaged in the wider impact of their work. One way to do just that is to identify the beneficiaries of the labor. When workers can connect the work they do with the person who benefits from their labor, not only has performance been proven to increase, but more purpose is found in the work. Research has proved this over and over. For example, scholarship fundraisers felt more motivated to secure donations when they had a chance to meet the scholarship recipients. Cooks were more motivated and worked harder when they could look out and see the families who would be eating their food. So in both of these examples, the beneficiaries of the labor were clearly identified, and that lessens loneliness and increases purpose at work. Well, there you have the 4 steps and strategies to move your team from isolated to all in. Now, please don't underestimate the impact of these actions and behaviors. Your behavior lessens loneliness, especially as a leader. You don't need to become a certified therapist. You just need to engage in small, intentional, and routine behaviors. According to psychologists, the best way to lessen loneliness and limit its effects is by using pro-social behavior. Pro-social behaviors are actions of comforting, sharing, helping, or cooperating that are backed by a general concern for the feelings, welfare, and rights of other people. Researchers in China found that leaders who show compassion to their employees can mitigate the negative effects of loneliness and thereby boost creativity. Another study of workers at Coca-Cola's Madrid headquarters found leaders were able to reduce feelings of isolation among their team by simply being nice in interacting with others. Executing pro-social behaviors every day makes a difference. Those on the receiving end of pro-social behavior were a whopping 278% as likely to engage in pro-social behaviors themselves. Loneliness is contagious, but so are pro-social actions. The ripple effect of lessening loneliness with pro-social behaviors is gigantic. So yes, if your team executes pro-social behaviors, it could ignite similar behaviors throughout your organization and even to the broader world, leading to healthier individuals, stronger families, and more united communities. When we foster environments where teams can thrive, big things happen. Our talent is in individuals, our strength is in numbers, and our hope is in leaders like you. So stay connectable.